Yes, I am. All right. Screw that. It's for the optics. This is me. Hello, I am Nick. Handles all up here. I currently live in Chicago. I'm a computer science student at the University of Chicago. Fun fact, I used to be a quote-unquote racing cyclist who usually just bike on the side of random suburban roads and probably get run over a whole lot. And then I came to Chicago and got red-pilled and started commuting on bike. And yeah, I am one of the presenters.
Hi, I'm Dorian, or Delorean. I'm originally from St. Louis. I currently live in Champaign, in the Urbana area, because I'm a master's student at the University of Illinois, go Illini. I am fairly new to cons in general. I've kind of been in the first space for a little bit, but this is my first year of attending cons. Like March was my first con ever. Yeah, I got my bachelor's in urban planning with a minor in geography and GIS this May. And then I'm sticking through with a master's in planning, internal transportation, city design, things like that.
Howdy, yeah, I'm Solvi. I'm from Minneapolis, and I'm a city planner up in Minnesota. I have an urban studies degree from the University of Minnesota, and I guess what got me into urban planning was just kind of SimCity when I was 5 years old. So, probably same for you guys. And then my fun fact is that I cannot tell you the make or model of any train car. I don't know. They all look the same. So,
But yeah, I think call upon the emergency power squad to do the identification.
all right, so I'm Kezl. Those are my handles, as you can see. I'm currently a biology student, pre-med track over at WashU in St. Louis. So nothing to do with this, but they did offer me a free transit pass. And freshman year, I took it, and then I fell down the rabbit hole, and now I'm here doing transit advocacy in St. Louis. So.
Hi, I'm North. I'm from here, Chicago, and I am a local activist who also has been to several dimensions. This is my third MFF. And my fact is that I've been named by the Kenosha streetcar. It's an interesting story. I'll tell it to you if you want to come up afterwards.
All right, now for part one of the talk, where I am sort of introducing Chicago and its urban fabric, why I love it, and why a lot of people love it. Quick show of hands, how many of you guys are local or come from the area? Awesome, okay. I am actually surprised. Well, a lot of this will be a repeat for you guys then, but for those of you who are visiting, I have heard on a couple occasions, I went to MFF and I thought Chicago just kind of sucked. That's because this is Rosemont, and Rosemont is a shithole. And Chicago is not Rosemont. So, that is part of why we're doing this quickly. But, basically, quick introduction, this area surrounding Chicago is called Chicagoland. I'm sorry I could not find a better population density map, but this is sort of the whole general Northeast Illinois region. You can see it pops into Indiana, and this one doesn't go as far up as Wisconsin, but it does go into Wisconsin. And Chicago is currently the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, second only to New York and LA, which is crazy because if you think about popular culture, it seems like not a lot of people really talk about Chicago. And I think that's a shame because I feel like almost anybody who comes here and really gives the city a chance loves it.
It's in a lot of good movies, so.
That's true. Have you ever seen the Blues Brothers? Great.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. There's Bueller's Day Off. Oh, God. And just, anyway, so yes, Chicago is definitely, the area is definitely a suburban agglomeration, not quite to the extent of maybe St. Louis, which has some special politics going on there that we won't get into here. But basically, on this map, the darkest red spots are all Chicago proper, pretty much. Chicago is actually very large, especially on the southern edge of the city. It annexed a lot of smaller towns, villages, suburbs, whatever the correct political term is. Not like politically correct term, I mean there's like a whole bunch of different classifications. This is actually the village of Rosemont, and it's like, it's a whole thing. But you can see sort of at the edges, Aurora, Elgin, Orland Park, and then into northern Indiana as well. But this, the city proper, is served by the Chicago L, run by the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA. This is the map of it. Fun fact, a majority of the system is not actually elevated, or New York has one. What?
A plurality of the system is elevated.
That's it. So, but it's still called the L, mostly because of the loop. It's so iconic downtown, a elevated loop circular structure that just goes around. There's 8 rail lines. You'll notice that all of them go directly downtown, except for our best friend, the Skokie Swift, up there. I love her so much, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise. But this is a criticism that you could really say about a lot of American transit. Very designed to bring people in and out of downtown centers. But because the loop just has such a large congregation of mass transit and regional rail, which we'll get to, it does actually serve as a very good transfer location. Just for, so my example, I live in Hyde Park, which is a neighborhood sort of on the south side, by the sort of edge of the right branch of the Green Line there. And I can actually take express bus or that up to downtown, and then from there, I can go basically anywhere. That's how I got here. Took the Blue Line to Rosemont. So actually, yeah, for context, I wish I know. Yeah, I know, laser pointer, I'll just hit Kezl in the face even more. The Rosemont is the second to last stop on the O'Hare branch of the Blue Line. So as you can see, like, we're basically surrounded by the city of Chicago, but it's special and also run by the mob. But that's another thing. Anyway, most of these rail lines are rehabilitated versions of super old lines. Some of which have actually been moved into expressway medians, which is sort of what North was getting at earlier, namely the red and blue lines, and there's plenty to be said about that. But then there's the orange line, which was actually built basically full cloth, but we use some old freight right away. But those are the newest tracks built in 1993. Fun fact, during the Reagan administration, which was very anti-public projects and mass transit, we got this line because of some, I believe it was either state senator or senator for the state of Illinois, or representative who voted for the Nicaraguan to, yes, the Contras, yes, and Reagan decided to reward that particular politician by giving them $2 billion to build a train. It's like the whole thing. Anyway, yes, so this is the L, and we love it very much. There's also, the CTA also runs buses, which I will get to. But yes, as I mentioned earlier, there is regional rail. It's really commuter rail, but I would argue that Metra in particular has done a really good job on most of the lines. We don't talk about the Heritage Corridor. They do a pretty good job of having off-peak reverse direction service to the suburbs and for reverse commuters as well. It is called Metra, not Metro. If you call it Metro, we'll laugh at you.
Short for Metropolitan Rail.
There you go. Yeah, and actually used to be branded as part of the RTA, right?
It is still part of it.
Right, but it was like called RTA. Yeah. Anyway, that's not important. But the important thing is, you can see there's really a lot of coverage and particularly densely packed stops in some of these areas. One interesting thing to note, all the metro lines except the Metro Electric on the very right are locomotive hauled. But the Metro Electric, because it was taken over from the Illinois Central Railroad, which had already electrified in like early 1900s or something, that is all electrified. It's actually quadruple tracked up to Kensington there, where the South Shore Line splits off, and that is one of the last remaining interurban trains in America, and we love her so much for it.
Except for the fact that we lost the last bit of the true interurban part of it.
I'm sorry?
Except for the fact that we lost the last true bit of the interurban bit recently.
This is true. Well, okay, so it's coming back though. So there's been a couple of things. They recently closed a big section of the line between, I believe it's Gary and Michigan City, to double track the line, and actually a lot of it is still closed and they're doing bus substitution, which kind of sucks. But the important thing is that it is running in active commuter service. It's subsidized by the state of Indiana because Northwest Indiana, it has just been, there's a lot of industrial kind of pollution and huge steel mills in the area, and so the South Shore Line really is a lifeline for the region, and so the otherwise pretty, I don't want to say conservative, but relatively non-transit friendly state of Indiana continuously supports the operations of the South Shore Line. It's very special, and we should ride it if you get the chance, because it really is special. The rolling stock is really cool. It's a little dated, but come on, it's America, everything is dated. Well, no, it is really quite cool, and the signs on there are very pretty. Anyway, that's actually shared with the Metro Electric up to downtown. But then we've got buses. They really do so much, guys. So like I said, CTA runs city bus routes, usually aligned purely on by major streets, connecting, sometimes deviating to transit centers, which can either mean just like on the curb next to a train station, or literally sometimes there are bus platforms, stations, whatever you want to call them. I mean, yeah, bus goes. Well, kind of, but yeah, little. They do call them transit centers, big bus connection hubs near rail stations. And usually these are aligned to the city grid, numbered for the street number that they're on. I'll get to that in a minute. Chicago has a very straight and regular street grid. It's really cool. But then there's Pace, which if you're really cool, you might have even ridden a Pace bus during the con to get around Roseland. But Pace is extremely important because, I mean, I know in St. Louis we don't really have school buses, right?
No, it's all just Metro bus.
Yeah, well, it's, but like, it's extremely important for areas that are not covered by the CTA, because the CTA, aside from Evanston,
Evanston, Skokie, and a few other suburbs do receive CTA bus service. I'm not really sure why, but they do.
Evanston, I think it was, CTA took over before RTA existed.
Ooh.
Evanston had a strike in '73. CTA was the only agency suitable for the job.
Yeah, that tracks. Evanston's a very interesting case. You might have seen the purple line. I don't really have time to talk about it right now. I'm already going over time a little bit, but it's pretty interesting. But Pace provides much broader coverage for the rest of the suburbs. Again, it's suburbia doesn't really have the same sort of street grid layout, so it's mostly identifying high priority corridors for Pace. I mentioned higher order transit. A lot of them are just getting you to a CTA. So for example, a lot of Pace buses connect to the southern terminus of the Red Line at 95th Dan Ryan. There's a huge bus terminal there. That's the word I was thinking of, bus terminus. There's a huge bus terminal there for southern suburban bus connections to get you onto rail and then get you where you're going from there. But higher order transit does not necessarily just mean trains. A very special thing, if you go on, I think technically on I-90, there's usually not enough traffic to necessitate it, but on I-55 especially, PACE buses are authorized to use the shoulder as a travel lane, which, I know, it sounds bad, but it's almost like BRT Light in a little way, like, no, it's not BRT, it's like an express thing, but the idea is there are PACE park and rides for these express bus services, and they're actually very popular. PACE runs a lot of like coach bus style routes just because of like length and time, and especially on like these I-55 express routes, they really do, you do actually get commuters parking and riding because it's faster than sitting in traffic on I-55. And again, connections to job centers, connections to education, PACE is extremely important, and I'm very thankful that we have it. And one important thing, PACE is unified across all, except for Indiana, Gary Metro and South Bend have their own things, but across basically all of the Chicago suburbs, PACE is, it is operated as a couple different groups, but it's all under the same agency, everything except Ventra. It is a unified system. It's so cool. I'll talk about it later when we get to the planning the trip section, but it's a big unified fare system, which New York could learn a little bit more from. But it's great. Anyway.
I also want to point out, before on from PACE, that they also run paratransit in Chicago.
Yes, they do. If you ever see a PACE bus in the city of Chicago without like a route number on it, and you're like, oh, that's a little weird. It's probably a paratransit bus, which is very interesting. Anyway, so yes, like I said, Chicago has a really cool street grid. I forgot my source, but I promise I'm correct, and please believe me, that it is the straightest street grid on like a city basis in the world. Even if you look at this map, you can see the grid is extremely regular, save for a few diagonal streets, and if you ignore the expressways, which I'm choosing to. But one really cool thing is that it's a coordinate grid. So like I said, all the streets are numbered. All the streets have coordinate numbers. On the south side, that is the name of the street. So, for example, around where I live, 51st Street is the coordinate latitude, I think. Let me see. Latitude or longitude? It's one of them.
Lattice flat, that's how you remember it.
Okay. Yes, thank you. The coordinate latitude of that is 5100 south. And the origin point is at the intersection of State and Madison downtown, and that is 0,0 on the coordinate system. All addresses, again, on the south side, the street names as well. And I think if you go far enough west, they'll even name some of the north-south avenues by their number. But this was all established by the 1909 Plan of Chicago. There's a misconception that it was the Great Fire of Chicago that inspired all this. It wasn't. The Great Fire of Chicago did happen, but Chicago just used to be really good at metropolitan planning. You might know there's like the actual reason behind it, but I don't know.
Daniel Burnham?
Burnham, yes, the Burnham Plan, that's what it is.
I do know about the avenues. They're actually lettered on the far southeast side of the city, avenues A through, I believe, G. And if you go far enough west, also, they start getting not numbered or lettered, but they all start with the same letter for a mile in a row. So it starts with all the K's, and you'll go through, I forget what some of them are there. Costner, all those, and then it'll go.
It starts with Kensington, yeah.
All alphabetical up through O.
Yes, it's really cool.
And the letter that it is how many miles east it is of the state line in Indiana. So
it's very cool. Like again, Chicago used to be really, really good at large-scale metropolitan planning, and then you get really cool stuff like this. And so a lot of these, you can see that like there's obviously spaces in between the grid, what happens there. So the major streets on the south side, there's like 51st Street, 55th Street, 63rd, usually spaced out every 4 to 8 blocks. You have a main thoroughfare, and there tends to be a lot of mixed use development. We love transit-oriented development in this house. And so a lot of them along the major properties, especially on the north side. The north side probably has some of the best development surrounding major thoroughfares. The south side, unfortunately, you know, a lot of yes, disinvestment, a lot of people of color, and some historical neglect from city and state government. And so it tends to be a little more car-oriented and not quite as mixed use and dense. But that is not to say that there's not density. There is still a lot of single-family homes in Chicago, but they're extremely dense. And not all of them are single-family. So we have like duplexes, 3 flats, low-rise apartment buildings, like the missing middle that urbanists like to talk about so much, which I'm sure we'll get to later. They're like, that is part of why, you know, living in Chicago is not, you know, it's not like you're living in downtown Manhattan and you're just in all high-rises. There's, you can still be a homeowner within walking distance to a train station in the city of Chicago. It's great. Anyway, yes, that is, I spent too much time on that, I am so sorry. That is me waxing poetic about Chicago done, and now we will go into the second part of the presentation about urbanism in general and activism. It's great. Please stay.
All right, so let's go on. What is urbanism, and why should I care? Yeah, so urbanism by definition, obviously, I did put the Wikipedia definition on there. So it's the study of how inhabitants of urban areas, such as towns and cities, interact with the built environment. It's more than just pointing and laughing at North America, which you can do. I mean, but you know, it's more than that. Yeah. So it's obviously more than just green paved streetcars. I think people kind of think that just making things green and putting some sort of light rail down it makes it urban, but that doesn't always be the fact. So
you can have good urbanism without rail at all, and it's extremely important.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of cities that don't have rail that are more dense. But yeah, so while it's a study about, you know, how we interact with cities, there's obviously certain ways that we create spaces and streetscapes. Urbanism, a lot of urbanists kind of talk about how we design our cities and how we design our plazas, and how a lot of cities in America are lacking, such as the third space. I forget the exact definition, but it's kind of like space where places where we can congregate and that kind of stuff, activating the street fun, because a lot of our streets are just kind of disgusting street. It's disgusting. I will say it. And most urbanists will come across, all of them, will denounce how we built society in the past 100 years, and here's why. Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna do the soy face and be like, oh my god, look at that, guys, it's stroke.
It's not Breezewood. I thought you were going to put Breezewood up here. It would have been really funny.
No, it's too easy. But I did look up stroke. This is like the third image, so yeah. I'll get to it. Yeah, so stroke stands for street and road. The street is kind of what we all live on, at least we're supposed to live on. It's what I live on. It's probably 30 to 40 feet wide. Maybe not 40 feet wide, but it's a certain amount of feet wide. That's 1 or 2 lanes, and you can. Sorry, there's a discussion going on. It's kind of distracting. But a road is also something that's faster and it's high speed. So a strode is kind of like a street that's kind of built a little wider and larger than it should be. And as you can see here, there's no trees. There is sidewalks, but you're not going to be walking on the sidewalk ever. I've never walked on any sidewalks, and I'm honest. There's also a wide berth between the businesses and the road, so it kind of separates it. It's meant to be driven fast on. It's meant to be a pass-through space. It's meant to be disgusting, and it's meant to make it just get from point A to point B as fast as possible. In a car. Yeah. If you really think you're gonna bike on this, you're crazy.
I tried.
Yeah. So this place is not a place of honor, obviously. It is, yes, nothing esteemed as commemorated here. But you should dig, and you should definitely eat whatever's in the ground. What are the reasons this place? So non-highway arterial streets, which is kind of like the more definition of a road instead of just saying it's a street and a road. Arterials are arteries. They are where we are supposed to move automobile traffic fast, and they are, without regard to anyone else, they are supposed to do that. They make some people's lives easier and make everyone else's lives harder. So they act as Berlin walls throughout each city, including many pedestrians and bicyclists who dare across the barren landscape. These are places that you forget about. They are places that no one cares about, and they are a waste of land. They are not respectful to the land that we are given. The sidewalks and bike lanes that are there are entirely cosmetic. No one would feel safe driving a bike down this, even if there's a painted line. I remember when I was in Florida once, I think it was Punta Gorda, but there was a bike lane just on the side of the road, like one of those Florida arterials that you see, the first ones, and it went through an on-ramp. So if people were taking in, like, with those Florida pickups, man, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about Florida. Yeah, so there's complete disregard for the national environment we stole, and it guarantees a constant stream of carbon and promotes anti-social social behavior. So, because suburban areas are anti-social, let's be real. I mean, I'll get to that, but go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a better streetscape. This is in Rochester, Minnesota, and this is right in downtown where the Mayo Clinic is. And as you can see, there's wide sidewalks. There is kind of an active streetscape where there's a statue, and to the left there's something called Peace Plaza, where there is a water fountain that you can walk in, and there's also, you can see pedestrian signs. There is cars, because urbanism is not all about just banning cars, even though I would love to do that. It's about creating multimodality between cars, bikes, and pedestrians. And in this First Avenue Southwest, there's cars, but they're going very slowly because the road's thin. There is people walking around normally. There is trees that would be eventually be growing larger and producing leaves because this was taken in November. There's those trash cans, as you can see. There's benches. There's places for people to sit, and that's just how you create a streetscape that is active and not unhealthy, where we all live. Next slide. Yeah. So as you say, greenery, bike parking. It's downtown, but you don't see lands used such as the former. You see large buildings, and this is where people should be going. It's a place you want to be at instead of a place you want to leave. At the end of this block, there's a 21-story tower that is proposed because there's investment going into these places. People want to live in these places, people want to live in downtown, because people are tired of these suburban shitholes that we live in. And yeah, so most of the places are made vacant in these suburban areas. There's a problem where commercial real estate, there's a bubble of vacant real estate. It's falling apart. You see these Kmarts that are vacant because no one wants to go on them. They're a waste of space.
So this is where I jump in. I'm going to go over some urban design elements and basically what makes a good space as well. So, because I'll just kind of nod at you when I'm going to click, because I've got like transitions. I'm getting fancy with this, yeah. So yeah, first up, Kevin Lynch was sort of a philosopher, kind of think tank guy for a lot of urban development in the early and middle 20th century. He wrote The Image of the City in 1960, and it has basically set the stage for a lot of how we approach cities as humans and sort of the philosophy behind placemaking. So he has these 5 concepts of what makes up a city for all human perception. You have paths, which are just spaces that you move through, you use them to get around. These can be anything. It can be a road, it can be a bikeway, a sidewalk, just however it gets you to move through the city, this is a path. You have things like districts. These are just large areas that you sort of associate with like a single use or a couple uses. So a big shopping center, a large residential area, the downtown, these are all districts. You have edges, these are your things that sort of prohibit or restrict the flow of people or goods. So you can have things like just the shore of a riverbank or a large body of water. You can have a highway which cuts communities in half. Those can be edges. These things can also overlap. A highway can definitely be a path, but it can also be a path for some, but be an edge for others. You have landmarks. These are your big, important monoliths that you can sort of see. And you use these things to orient yourself in the space so you can know where you are. So for a lot of folks like in Chicago, you can sort of, you see the Sears Tower and you're like, okay, I'm here relative to the downtown. I'm here relative to this space. And that can be a lot of different things. It can be a church in your neighborhood. You see the steeple from far away, things like that. And then lastly, we kind of end with nodes, and those are sort of where pathways intersect. It's high areas of activity where there's a lot of connection and throughput. And so when you take these elements, you ask folks to map them out and create lynch maps named after David Lynch, and you get things like this. Can anyone tell me what city this is? Can you recognize it? It's very abstract. It's very hard to discern. Someone got it. Someone got it. Yeah. Boston. Yes. Kezl, if you can go ahead. Here, go back one. There. So you can see that this is how people are interpreting these spaces. So that sketch of Boston was pulled directly from Lynch's book. He basically sort of compiled dozens of these drawings of people's interactions and experiences with the city of Boston. And you create things where you have major roads that are these pathways in and out of the city. This is also 1960, so the researchers from the 50s, before a lot of the highways came through and completely changed a lot of the landscape of Boston. But you can still see there's a lot of applicability to these terms and places. It's just a very cool way to sort of analyze where you live and how you travel through a place. So if you go again one more time, these two in the bottom left are ones that I've had to make for classes, because this is how I was educated on this stuff. And so these are for, the one in the bottom left corner is just the Champaign-Urbana area. And so you have the highways cutting through, acting as highways in some parts, but then as edges in others. You have the sort of districts, the two downtowns, because they're sort of the Twin Cities scenario. These two kind of highly intensified districts. Thank you. You have the university campus itself, which is a very unique space, and even the shopping district of North Prospect on the northern end of the city, where all of like the big box office stores are in the mall. That's somehow not dead yet, but probably will be soon. And then that center sketch is just downtown itself as a lynch map. Like you can do these on any scale, so it's just a very interesting way to sort of interact with and interpret the places you live in.
All right, so what are some of the consequences of kind of designing our cities so that driving is pretty much the only feasible option? Well, let's think about it. First, if everything's spaced out and you can't really walk anywhere, well then you're not going to walk to a bus stop, you're not going to walk to a train station, no one's going to use public transit doesn't get enough money, so it cuts service, so you get worse transit, so fewer people use it, and you get things like this, right? Transit service cuts all over the board. And then, if you're a kid, maybe I can just go. Okay, all right. So, if you're a kid, you probably can't drive, I'm assuming. So basically, pretty much everything else is off limits unless you can get your parents to drive you everywhere. So that's going to severely limit your freedom right there, and it's going to create sort of the soccer mom situation where your parents are like, I'm going to take you there again. And then, it's also costly to individuals. I mean, owning a car is pretty darn expensive. And then, so if you don't have a lot of money, that's going to put you in a lot of financial burden. And if you can't afford a car and you don't buy one, and you're relying on broken public transit, you're not going to have access to all of the jobs that are kind of just leaving out in the suburbs. So that's a serious problem. And not only is it expensive for you, it's expensive for the city. Because if you spread things out, you don't have that tax base that can actually support city services. Because you'll have to provide more city services for fewer people. And so usually these are single-family home, like low-density districts that are actually in financial debt. They are funded by debt. They do not provide any source of consistent income for the city overall, compared to at least the denser parts. So think fire, utilities, policing, etc. All of these services. And then we get traffic. We all love traffic, right? So, does anyone know what this is? Yep, there you go. KB Freeway. Yes. Buildings, places that you can only get to by car, means everyone's gonna drive, and you get stuff like that. And then, since you want people to, get there faster, you're gonna say, let's add another lane. Let's bulldoze an entire city. So, this is a pretty flat neighborhood in St. Louis, called Milton Valley. It was completely flattened for highways and urban renewal in St. Louis. For fast traffic.
Yes, minorities live there.
Yes, it was a primarily black neighborhood, right there, Milton Valley.
40,000 people were displaced.
Yeah.
Is SLU is still tearing more down?
Oh, yes.
Detroit did that back in the 50s.
And that's all funded that's also debt funding right there too. And then, of course, since everyone's driving, and then like the few people who can't drive, you're left with infrastructure that's barely funded for you, like crappy sidewalks, unsafe bike lanes, and just roads with high-speed vehicle traffic. Yeah, a lot of people get hit. A lot of people get killed on our roads relative to other Western nations. It's really, really sad that we've ended up in this situation. But, and there's a photo of that, it doesn't have to be this way, nor was it always this way, and that's the crazy part, okay? If you look back into history, we used to be a walkable, transit-oriented country where you could get around without a car. That was how things worked. We didn't always have cars. Like here in St. Louis, here's our transit network there with streetcars. Some of those streetcars came every 90 seconds. They were basically an elevator, okay? There's an example of the buses and cars, a few automobiles in there. And then we can redesign our places to go back to that. So right there, for example, bus lanes, transit improvements, dense infill development. And so for that, we're going to talk a little bit more with this.
Yeah, we guys. I think I just like to touch on one thing. So, about the elevator thing, I think obviously 90 seconds is a better frequency than the elevators we have here in MFF. But also, I think that, how many of you guys like the food selection around MFF right now? Raise your hand and no one's raising their hand. You're too nervous. The reason why that is because obviously we're living in a suburban area right now. The con obviously is the largest in the world, but it's obviously unfortunately a place like this. I did analysis on some conventions and their growth between 2022 and 2023. And I believe the highest ones were A&E, FE, and I forget, but it was
AC grew up pretty big.
It grows much because it's already large. When you go from 11 to 13,000, it's not as much as it's going from 1,500 to 3,000. So it was 60% growth for A&E, I believe. And A&E, of course, along with FE, is located in downtown Toronto and downtown Boston with pretty ample food selection and pretty ample amenities. So I would just like to say that there is a case for putting your con downtown. And that's why there's some cons like First Square that are moving from Brookfield, which is a suburban shithole in Milwaukee, to downtown Milwaukee. So anyways, I'll get to the slides. So what you see here is a typical lot in South Minneapolis. And if you can find it, I'll give you $5. But it's basically, there's obviously a house on it, a single-family house, along with a driveway and a garage. And I did a calculation out here that the total square footage of this parcel was about 5,600 square feet. So the driveway and garage amount to about 2,000 square feet, which is about 36% of this parcel is cars only. So whatever kids is living there is never gonna use, I've never put in the driveway, like maybe like some kickball or something, but that's just gonna lay vacant for the entire time you live there. So that's just one thing. In America, we have a huge problem with land use and just building wherever we want because we have infinite land, at least we think we do. But there's things you can do with these kind of parcels. Like you could easily fit up to like an 8-plex on this land. As they'll say in future slides, there is some even crazier things you can do. So go to the next one. Yeah. So this is typical single-family lot in suburban Minneapolis. It is 22,120 square feet, and it is just for a family. It could be just for one person, honestly. So, and just to the south, I didn't put this on there, but there is the only grocery store in town is there, along with a large parking lot, of course, because how else are we gonna get around? And yeah, so this is right next to a very high-amenity location, but it is completely separate from the highway which is to the south, along with completely separate from the grocery store which is to the south. So we have to drive probably about a mile just to go across the street.
So, why are things kind of this way? Well, it's not because it was inevitable, okay? These are deliberate policy decisions. Exclusionary zoning. Basically, you're saying, hey, this use, you have to specifically have this one use here, homes here, businesses here. You can't have them on top of each other and like move between places. And then, Delorean, do you want to touch on some others?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, with exclusionary zoning, it's effectively just how we got around, 1919, the Supreme Court outlawed being racist in your zoning codes. So the municipalities were like, oh, okay, well then we could just be classist and effectively cast the same net of people out. So you're looking at things like increasing, a lot of these things are actually up here as reasons of how exclusionary zoning works. So you're looking at things like, these cities require your minimum lot sizes to be excessively large so that they are driving the prices up because you're buying more land, therefore only wealthier people can afford these homes. Maybe, I think Hoboken, New Jersey for a while, which is just across the Hudson from New York City, for a while was, and they may still have very high quality guidelines for the materials used. You can only use certain very expensive materials for the buildings. That's going to drive the construction costs up and drive the housing prices up. Things like that to basically unnecessarily drive up the prices of these areas so that only the wealthy, which usually tends to be of a certain ethnicity, can afford to live in these areas. Excessive parking minimums, which I'll touch on the next slide. Basically, you're dedicating way more land to parking than you never need to. It's inefficient use of land. You're losing tax revenue that you otherwise be getting. You're requiring developers to build out more, driving up their costs unnecessarily. Excessive minimum lot sizes and setbacks. That's also another part of exclusionary zoning where they need you to have a really big side yard, a really big front yard. For what reason? Nothing more than just you're going to have a huge lot, so that you have to pay a lot more money for it. Disproportionate subsidies for roads and highways. I'm sure, like, this is a land use map of Rosemont. I feel like Rosemont probably only controls like less than half of itself, just because the state DOT is just the whole thing's a highway. I mean, it's just, yeah, right, yeah. There's also, looking at things like high-speed road design. So basically, in the 50s and 60s, transportation engineers were like, well, we need to standardize how we control traffic. Let's just measure the speeds of everyone driving down these roads, chop off the top 15% of the highest speed drivers, and so 85% below, that 85% limit is the speed limit now. So that it's literally as simple as that, which, if it's simple, it's probably not the best. Like, it's not Occam reasoning in this instance. Like, you basically very arbitrarily just determined, like, oh yeah, this road is going to be 45 miles per hour because the bottom 85% of drivers drive 45. Why do they drive that way? Maybe because the road's designed really wide. There's no nuance or really thought into why people are driving as fast as they are. They just are, so that's how they're going to drive. And then you're also going to look at NIMBYism. People are very hostile towards, you know, changes in the neighborhood, which there's some cases for, you know, wanting to preserve history or this and that, but a lot of the times it's very arbitrary. They're just scared of change. They're scared of the others. There's, you know, you can cherry pick some somewhat reasonable points to me, but in some town meetings that I've witnessed, people don't like the roof pitch. It's just not at the angle they want it to be at. It's too steep or it's too shallow of a roof pitch. I'm sorry, I'm gonna swear, who gives a shit? It's like, the angle of the roof does not, like, what the fuck? I don't know. Anyways, so to go on to the next slide, I'm just gonna talk about a great little scapegoat so that everyone can just go get mad at them. This is specifically for parking minimums. I'm sorry if anyone here is a transportation engineer, because I know a lot of us are in STEM. So this here is a YouTube video by Climatown that I suggest you all check out. He's got some great stuff on just climate activism in general. He does touch on urbanist principles in some of his videos. One of the most recent ones is this on parking requirements and how they are strangling America. He's also really funny. I just like him a lot. It's a very entertaining watch. Like, he keeps it entertaining throughout. So in this, he talks about the Institution of Transportation Engineers and their parking minimums sort of guidebook. And these are just some example charts from them. Speaking of a lot of us being in STEM, I'm sure tons of us have taken statistics classes and know a lot about, against our will or not, we've taken statistics courses. And so these are just example charts of how they determined parking requirements for certain land uses. So they have hundreds and hundreds of different example land uses. So you can look at how many parking spaces do you need for a nail salon? How many do you need for a strip mall? How many do you need for this, for that? They have it. How do they determine it? They go out and take random samples of random nail salons or strip malls or hotels, banks, etc. from around the country, plot them on a chart, usually up against the size of the building. Some things, if it's a service like a nail salon, it's how many booths there are, but generally it's just how big the building is versus then they go out and just look at the parking lot and see how many spots they have. And they put it on a chart, plot it, give it a trend line, and then just send it on its way. Half of all of the uses in this, and this, sorry, I should preface this with, this is basically the go-to for all city planning parking minimums. Like, there's not really a better source. Like, there's just really not anywhere else to turn to. So this is what thousands of municipalities across the US dictating the lives of tens or hundreds of millions of Americans use to determine how many parking spaces a thing needs. And half of all of the uses in this book, half of all of the charts determining, you know, the hundreds of millions of people and the thousands and thousands and thousands of, you know, nail salons, for instance, across the country, are based off of 4 or fewer data points. And if you know anything about small sample sizes and deviations, that is insane. How can you use four nail salons to determine every other nail salon in the United States, effectively? And guess what? It gets even worse. A quarter of all of these charts are a single fucking data point. You have one random nail salon in, like, Kenosha, Wisconsin, that somehow got lucky enough to determine every other one in the entire country. And they try to draw a trend line, and they try to tell you in the bottom of the corner in a little text saying, warning, low R-square value. But there's nothing, it's like, okay, I know that this has no correlation to the actual needs of the parking lot, but we have nothing else to go on, so this is what we're gonna use. So like, I think for those up there, it's like, the R-square value is 0.038, which is like under 4%. In layman's terms, basically, it has less than 4% to do with anything parking related, like the size of the building. Like, it's just ridiculous. If you want to go ahead, this right here is, if you guys know the Hudson Yards development in New York City, it's fairly new. It's got its problems outright, but one of the things it didn't have to deal with was, you know, Louisville, Kentucky's parking minimums. Louisville has, thankfully, I think since this graphic has come out, changed it so it's not as bad, but that sort of
little blue square is the Hudson Yards development. This is from the Climate and Transit folks, and then I think Hayden Clarkin, at the Transit Guy on Twitter. They basically have photoshopped if the Hudson Yards, which is about 18 million square feet of retail, office, residential, etc., had to adhere to downtown Louisville's parking requirements. That big block of gray to the left is all the parking that's been photoshopped in to take up the required parking space, the required parking. That is, what does it say on there, Kezl? 150,000 people would have to be demolished. It's like, and if you click again, this is the reality in other cities. This is another very famous image of Tulsa, Oklahoma, their downtown. 54% of downtown Tulsa's land area is parking. It is more parking than anything else.
And there were buildings bulldozed.
Yes, I mean, basically all of these parking lots had buildings on them beforehand. So you're getting to a point where you're bulldozing so much for parking, there's nothing to park for. You bulldoze the building you would have otherwise parked to go into. Like,
Fuck Robert Moses!
Fuck Robert Moses. Real quick, I just want to interject. I'd just like to interject for a second. What you're talking about is new Linux. No, I'm sorry. I just want to mention, look at this photo. It is framed on all sides by highways. And so, exactly, Kansas City, kind of St. Louis, a little bit. Unfortunately, some of downtown Chicago, yeah, fucking Robert Moses, again. Like, and then tons and tons of other cities. God-forsaken Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Texas, just fucking Texas in general. All of this shit, like, just look at how much, Bill's saying, like, it's just, if you try to make it easier to get into these places, you're destroying all of the places that people want to go to anyways. So, and all of the ease of what? Like, having not to stop at traffic lights for like 3 minutes? It's insane. And then people think, oh, we need to add just one more fucking lane and we'll fix traffic. Because, like, anyway, please continue.
yeah, so this is, I mean, this is the cost of how we've designed our cities. So this right here, and because when you click, it's a slow transition, so don't just let it fades. It's real pretty. No. I'll tell you what. But this is just one example neighborhood that I pulled from, St. Louis, for instance. So this is the Wells-Newfell neighborhood. This is a satellite image from 1938. Well, it's not satellite. There's no satellites there. But this is an aerial. Sorry, aerial. This is an aerial shot of this neighborhood in 1938. The 1940 census, just 2 years later, it had 30,000 people, just over 30,000 people kind of living in this little square, a little more outside. But if you click, this is it in a 2018, now this is satellite shot. In the 2020 census, this same neighborhood has just over 7,000 people. This is a quarter of the people originally there. And I'm gonna kind of soapbox and get a little less urban design on here. I'm gonna get a little more I'm gonna get into the emotion. This is more than empty lots. This is more than the grass that you see that's overgrown. This is more than the buildings that are gone. These are the people that are gone. These are the lives that are gone. These are the experiences that are gone. These are human places. These are human emotions. These are lives that have been destroyed. These are histories. These are cultures that have been destroyed. And this is one neighborhood of one city that has dozens of neighborhoods like this, of dozens of cities in dozens of states across the U.S. Like, this is a lot to reckon with. I don't want to get doomer. And so we're going to follow this up with the solutions. Yeah.
Alright. So I'm going to quickly just go through because I know we're short on time. Obviously, pretty much the opposite of all of these problems is just basically focusing on policy solutions such as zoning reform, putting things closer together by eliminating or reducing parking minimums, upzoning neighborhoods, allowing taller buildings, more denser buildings to be built, and allowing more mixed uses. So, for example, a restaurant and then on top apartments or something like that. so that you can walk to some places, you can bike to other places, you don't have to drive just to get there. Road design, making it safer for pedestrians and cyclists by traffic calming, making it a little bit narrower so drivers psychologically feel that they need to slow down. And obviously just more funding for transit, bike, and pedestrian infrastructure. That could be bike lanes, transit right-of-way, signal priority, and there's like a bunch of other solutions that we could talk about for multiple days on end. We could take an entire course on it.
All right, gamers. So that was fun. But yeah, so thanks everyone for staying this long, by the way. But yeah, so this is as I was talking earlier, the lot sizes and that kind of stuff are an efficiency of land use. This is a 11,872 square foot lot with 32 units. As I was saying earlier, there's a 22,000 square foot lot with one single-family house on it that may just have one person living in it, or it could be vacant. So yeah, there's no parking spaces in this lot, and there is 20 exterior bike parking spots and 36 interior bike parking spots as required by the Minneapolis City Code. So the terms are actually short-term and long-term bike parking. Most of the time it's both a mix of short and long-term. So that is legal in Minneapolis 2040 plan. I think it was just had to go through the planning commission approval.
They're building a lot of these, buildings inside the neighborhood. They actually tore down the whole fire station and building a condo that was erected this month.
Modularly. Yeah, so and then in this 10,800 square foot lot in South Minneapolis, there is 20 parking spaces provided underground, but also there is 21 bike parking spaces inside, and that's pretty good. I mean, and then yeah, so that is that. This was it was just a single house beforehand. And then so this is on that last building was on Bryant Avenue in South Minneapolis. They recently just did this year. There is a road on the left side, along with bike paths, and there is still a road on right now.
This is the future of the liberals want.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the future of liberals want. This is, yeah. So, yeah.
So, obviously, you know, we all love urbanism, hopefully, but at the end of the day...
If you don't, it's been an hour.
So what can you do? Ultimately, first of all, you can get in the know, figure out what's going on. Just follow local news. Usually you might also have like a development news agency kind of in your local area. Interesting enough, usually these are like middle-aged white guys with very interesting stories. So for example, in Chicago, we have Urbanized Chicago. St. Louis, it's Next STL. And then in Cleveland, it's Neotrans. And then beyond getting in the know, you could also go into a little more indirect action. So tell your families, you know, spread the good word, and then ride transit, walk, bike, get a taste of what that is like. Even if it does suck, you know, you can at least know the struggles and kind of advocate for that. Follow along with urbanism and advocacy organizations, of course.
If you want info on local groups, I know most of them, and if you're local, you can come just ask me about it later.
Yeah. So for example, CTA, commuters take action, so that is the Transit Riders Union here in Chicago. Bike Grid Now, cycling advocacy, and then Better Streets Chicago, kind of Safe Streets, a little bit of a overall organization as well. And then direct action, this is where the fun gets in. Vote, for the love of God, vote. There's like so many things that people don't notice, like basic like zoning amendments and changes. If you put your voice in there and vote, it can change a lot. Beyond that, you can attend and testify in city council neighborhood meetings, kind of like what I'm doing down here. That one, I'm finding a bunch of NIMBYs that you can't see in the back. And then you can also participate in public open houses, feedback events, provide your feedback instead of just a bunch of crappy, you know, angry homeowners who don't want those renters. And then you can write letters to officials, kind of push for legislation, push for them to adopt some types of legislation, and really get things going.
And I'd also like to say, by definition, voting is not direct action, but it is an action you can take.
All right. Urbanism and the phantom. Oh.
Speed run.
So, I actually read all that. Yeah. I went through the St. Louis FURS chat for about a year's period of span looking for messages, and these are what showed up.
So we did the 2040 plan, which was we were like the first large city to ban single-family zoning. Fayetteville, Arkansas, shout out to them. I will give Arkansas credit for one thing. They did get rid of zoning, single-family zoning first. So, but yeah, Minneapolis was the first big city to do that. We had no parking minimums in the plan. Better land use, along with SROs. We legalized SROs, which is called single room occupancy. That used to be the old kind of housing that unhoused people would use back prior to maybe the 80s, but they were banned because people thought they were unsightly, they thought they were housing drugs, they thought they were disgusting. But you know what? When you get rid of places for people to do drugs or just be poor and impoverished, then they'll be on the streets. So
Your personal discomfort with poor people does not mean that they shouldn't have a place to live or a place to exist. Sorry.
no, Nick, you're first. Go for it. Yeah, so that's kind of it. Anyways, yeah, spatial inequality and the furry fandom. So this is the title of the panel I did in furry migration last year in 2022. I'm just going to kind of touch on that today. So, yeah, we're going to the U of M did spatial inequality. I think it's called mapping prejudice. They mapped at least most of the racial covenants in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Racial covenants were where you would ban racial minorities from buying the property. This was legal up until 1948, until a Supreme Court decision banned it. One of the good things the Supreme Court did once. So this is kind of inspiring to map what was going on in fandom. So next slide. Yeah, so on the left, you'll see, of course, I'll know what it looks like, but that's Minneapolis, St. Paul. That is dark red, has highway percentage plus high income, along with yellow has a low white percentage and low income. It's kind of like a gradient, as one would say. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a bigger picture later. There's little green dots on there that have the events that Minnesota Furs, the Men Furs, held between 2016 and 2022. And those are mostly held not in any of the yellow areas or the minority areas. So the furry fandom, at least previously, was not hosting any events, either indirectly or directly. Because I lived in Minneapolis, I was kind of like, man, we're always driving out to the suburbs to do this kind of stuff. Like, why is that? So me being a university student with free access to software that I can use for university projects, right, guys? I mapped it using my GIS. So yeah, that is that, and then I'll just let Kezl take over.
Yeah, and then just looking at the St. Louis area where I'm at, and I don't have a car, these are official St. Louis Furs events located in the area, mapped along with transit routes. So basically, all of those people who you saw previously who don't have a car, they cannot attend most of these events, except for that one right there, located right at that dot in Maryland Heights.
Gateway Fermi.
Yep, Gateway Fermi. Pretty much everything else you can't get to, because it's just located way out across in St. Charles, where there's no bus service that you can rely on.
Real quick, I do just want to for you switch slides. You might think to yourself, yes, there might not be transit connections, but we still have Uber, right? We still have taxis. That doesn't solve the core problem of these places being fundamentally inaccessible to a lot of people. I'm sure just to get food around MFF, a lot of people will pile into Ubers or like, split fares and things like that just to go to a restaurant and come back. Number one, there's $40 spent on transportation that if you were in a more walkable, denser area, that tends to correlate with having good transit, but not necessarily. That's another thing. Transit is a component of, but not necessary for good urbanism. And so, like, when you compare it to having these, like, events in, like, the middle of the suburbs, or, like, here in Rosemont, yes, there are still options of getting around, but it's so inaccessible to a lot of people that it really hurts the convention-going experience. And like Solvi said earlier, you'll notice that conventions in like denser downtown areas, again, not necessarily with transit, but just with good human amenities and interacting with real people too, that people are enjoying themselves a lot more. You don't hear people complaining about like, oh, I had to travel 5 miles in a crowded Uber with 5 other people just to get lunch, because they can just go next door and have an amazing local meal. And it's just really important to consider. I'm not sure if many of us are actually planning staff, but just think about it when you're thinking about, never mind, we got a couple, awesome. Please listen to us. But yeah, like yeah, exactly. So, okay, yeah. Yes, I will get my soapbox.
Yeah, so a little bit of Minneapolis data here. So yeah, the Twin Cities, so you can see there's kind of 2 dots on there. But yeah, so on the left, I circled kind of the neighborhoods that are typically underserved in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Low weight percentage, low income, and they're designated as areas where there's also more transit there. Like also typically there's transit that goes to Mall of America. As you can see, it goes to the south. That's our Mecca. But yeah, it goes to Minneapolis. The black lines on the right are the transit lines that are in Minneapolis-St. Paul. As you can see, there's not there's like 1 or 2 dots that intersect with it, and some of those times those dots were just kind of like really small events. So all the big ones will be held in the suburbs. That's kind of the deal with this. I think we'll just stand this to maybe let people look a little harder. But yeah, so I think touching on the last thing, I think that there's just kind of, honestly, you were talking about, yeah, comments. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I had so much fucking fun at Furl Equinox when we did the Harbor Walk. Like there's a lot of good things going on in Toronto, and that's one of the good things going on there. That you could just go out, you're walking around, you're like right next to the CN Tower, you're on the front, you're actually seeing things, you're experiencing things, you're having fun with friends, and you just get around. In a place like this, you don't remember Rosemont, you don't remember anything you're doing here. All you remember is all the fun you have in the hotel, of course. But it's just, there's more than that. Of course, I always hear people, I've never been to downtown Chicago from MFF. I've been here 3 years in a row now. I've never gone downtown. This will be the first day I go downtown.
This is why we're doing this. Exactly.
Yeah, and I've been downtown since I was like 5 years old. Like everyone's like, I want to go downtown, because it's a 45-minute train ride or some sort of Uber, and it's the same amount of time. When I got here, it was the same amount of time. It was 5 p.m. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so I kind of was like, you know what? There's like this cool thing called Open Streets Minneapolis, put on by Art Streets Minneapolis, where they shut down a street for about 20 to 25 blocks of it, and everyone just kind of walks down it. So I brought a bunch of furries there, and it's just last year at Lyndale Avenue, and we had 4 people fursuiting, and everyone was kind of hanging out. Everyone thought it was a good time. Everyone loved us. There were so many pictures taken of us. I think some drunk mom was kind of saying some weird stuff to us. I forgot. She asked you about your litter box. Yeah, November 2022, guys, that was it. But anyways, looking back on it, it's kind of fun. So Open Streets Franklin, another one we did, Franklin Avenue. And I think it's a very Minneapolis picture on the bottom. There's a tank top guy with a gay flag rollerblading behind us, along with the bike. And then to the left is the Communist Party USA booth. We were just interacting with the community. I think that's one thing, because I would go to these group meets out in the suburbs, hundreds of furries, and this is nothing against Minnesota Furs, they're a great organization, but we're just kind of isolated. Like I remember there was this Ukrainian refugee welcome event going on next door at the picnic shelter adjacent to us, and none of us interacted with it. Because we're separated, we're not interacting with the community, so we're just kind of like an enigma. People only know about us from the CSI episode. So, yeah, I think that getting out the community, like, on the top right there, that's a little bit of urbanism there. That's Milwaukee Avenue in Minneapolis. That was shut down in the 70s, as I think they wanted to do, I don't know if they were going to raise the area of urban renewal, but they saved it. It's a bunch of houses that are really close together. That's the street that we're standing on. It's a pedestrian street. And it's obviously a very expensive neighborhood to live in, because there's like one pedestrian street in the whole Midwest probably. I'm sure there's one in Chicago, so. But it's just like, that's the only one in Minneapolis. So yeah. Yeah, and then most recent one we did was Opus Reese Lindale, October 2023. We were hanging out. That would be an 8 fursuiters there, double the amount, and we had you know, a whole bunch of people watching us all as long, hanging out with us. So I think it was a success, growing membership and that kind of stuff. And of course, Art Streets Minneapolis now is caught on that we're going to these kind of things. We've done pretty much every one, and now I think they took like a promotional video of us or something, and they call us the furries. So we're known there now. They know us, and we're not calling it on us. So yeah, and like on the bottom right there, like these folks just want us to like, take a picture to like advertise their garage sale. Like and on the bottom left, we're sitting over in the same spot where I took the first picture of Lindale Avenue. And yeah, I think it's just I think bring people in the city, but it's also I think it's just interacting with the community because this is probably the first time any of the people at these events, if they live in the area, have seen furries in the community because there's never been furry events hosted in these areas, as I showed on the map. Excellent. Yeah, so where we all end up with this, within the circles, unintentionally, they just kind of end up in them. It might be also just kind of how Art Street schedules their events, because they're a progressive organization, they're kind of like Better Street Chicago. But yeah, we just kind of ended up distributed throughout the city in minority-majority areas, and we had great engagement at the events. People loved us, and we're definitely going to go back next year for sure. So, and the first time anyone's ever been in these areas, I look back, several years, and I've been for events, and there was nothing ever held in North Minneapolis. There was nothing ever held in North St. Paul, and those are some of the most disadvantaged areas of the Twin Cities metro. So, yeah, sorry. One thing I also noticed was that we hadn't had any events in St. Paul from 2016 to 2022. So that's our second largest city, our capital city. Hadn't had any furry events in 7 years, and I think that's pretty wild. I was like, no way. But yeah, so it's our capital city, most important, second important city. Screw St. Paul. Yeah, so, whose slide is this?
Oh, yeah. So, at the end of the day, what can you do? Again, we asked that question. Organize events, consider transit, whether or not it's organizing events near transit, publicizing transit, or consulting people who don't have cars to reach these events. And then as Solvi has demonstrated, really just engaging with local organizations so that you can really ingrain yourself within the city itself and with the people there. And then when we're talking about, for example, communicating transit options, Solvi has some good examples. So for example, is this from further...
Free migration.
Free migration, yes. And then, of course, I hope everyone has seen the wonderful transit map made by Fancy Fox right here. It's this kind of work that, keeps us going, keeps this place amazing.
Run for president, please.
Was this your first year doing the furry transit network here?
For free migration?
No, for here, MFF.
For the transit panel?
No, for the shuttle system.
Yeah, I think it is. And they were pretty effective from what I heard, so that's
I
good.
don't think
All right, so that's basically the end of the presentation. Any questions? We've got some time for Q&A. If you'd like to interrogate a couple of arrogant urbanists on what we really think, yeah, we actually did really good on time.
What's the...
And then we also have a little bit of an extra cool thing from Twiggy here, who has a little bit of extra Chicago transit stuff to tell about. And then also, if you want to be redesigning Rosemont, here's a QR code on Canva account if you have Canva. If not, we also have some paper copies here, just a little fun activity. And I posted on Twitter a while back to send me photos or drawings of your persona or you taking transit, biking, walking, getting political. And this is what y'all sent me. Oh my God. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you.
So yeah, if you want to come up to the front, we've got, like Kezl said, we have paper copies of the redesigned Rosemont thing. We've also got CTA and Metro maps and a bunch of markers. You can doodle, show. Yes, and pens. Yeah, well, trust me, Sharpies are surprisingly hard to find nowadays.
We got a system map and a metro map.